The last resort. The Helios drifted through the Orion sector like a relic from a forgotten age. Its hull, a patchwork of titanium and durasteel plates, stood in stark contrast to the sleek vessels of the United Earth Fleet. Captain Alina Chen watched from the bridge as another military corvette passed by, its crew likely wondering how such an antiquated vessel maintained deep space certification. "They're hailing us again," Lieutenant James Cooper reported from his communications station, which consisted of physical switches and analog displays rather than the standard neural interfaces. "Fleet Command wants to know why we haven't upgraded to the quantum network yet." Elena smiled, running her hand along the ship's manual control panel. "Tell them the same thing we always do. We're a private freight contractor, and our certification is current." The Helios was more than just outdated. It was deliberately archaic. When the rest of humanity had embraced the quantum network, neural interfaces, and AI-assisted navigation, the Lena had gone in the opposite direction. She'd stripped out every smart system and replaced them with mechanical alternatives. Her crew had thought she was crazy, but they trusted her instincts. The ship's engineer, Dr. Sarah Martinez, emerged from the access tunnel, wiping grease from her hands. "The analog radar is acting up again, but I managed to stabilize it with some parts from that old satellite we salvage. Not pretty, but it works." "That's our motto, isn't it?" Elena replied. "Not pretty, but it works." The bridge crew shared a knowing laugh. They were all experts in their fields who had chosen to serve on this unconventional vessel. While their colleagues chased promotions on state-of-the-art ships, they had embraced Elena's vision of self-reliance and mechanical simplicity. Their laughter died as new information scrolled across the primary display. An actual physical screen, not a hologram. 3 Earth Fleet vessels had gone dark in the past week, all in the same sector. Modern ships with state-of-the-art systems and experienced crews simply vanishing. "Dr. Martinez," Elena called out, "what do we know about the disappearance zone?" Sarah was already pulling up charts on her station. "It's near the Edge Nebula. Heavy ionic interference there. Plays havoc with quantum communications and neural networks. That's why they haven't established permanent colonies in the region yet. And why they contract us to make supply runs there," James added. "Our shielding might be crude, but it works." Elena studied the emergency bulletin again. Something about those disappearances nagged at her. Modern ships with their interconnected systems, their reliance on quantum communications and AI support. What happened when those systems encountered something they weren't programmed to handle? The Helios shuddered as another fleet vessel passed too close, its wake disrupting their stabilizers. Elena waited as the mechanical systems automatically compensated. No AI needed. "Captain," James called out, his voice tense. "I'm picking up a distress signal. It's from the Edge Nebula sector." Elena moved to his station, studying the primitive but reliable displays. The signal was weak, barely detectable on their old equipment. Modern ships, with their sophisticated sensors, would have probably missed it entirely. "It's using an old frequency," James continued, adjusting the manual tuner. "Pre-quantum network. The kind of signal only we would be looking for." Sarah joined them, her expression grim. "The interference in that sector. Our ship might be the only one capable of responding. Modern vessels would be flying blind." Elena returned to her command chair, her decision already made. The Helios might have been considered obsolete by fleet standards, but sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Sometimes survival didn't depend on having the most advanced technology, but on understanding the basic principles that made technology work. "Plot a course for the Edge Nebula," she ordered. "Let's show the fleet why they shouldn't be so quick to dismiss the past." As the Helios' chemical engines rumbled to life, no antimatter drive here, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that their supposedly obsolete ship was about to prove its worth in ways none of them expected. Sometimes, she thought, watching the gleaming fleet vessels disappear behind them, being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The old freighter might have been a rust bucket by modern standards, but Elena knew better. In space, it wasn't about looking good or having the latest technology. It was about surviving, adapting, and getting the job done. And the Helios, with all its patches and jury-rigged systems, was very, very good at surviving. As they set course for the Edge Nebula, none of them could have known they were heading straight toward a threat that would make their primitive technology humanity's last, best hope for survival. Digital darkness. The Edge Nebula loomed before them like a curtain of cosmic dust, its swirling clouds illuminated by distant stars. The Helios's outdated sensors provided a grainy but reliable view of their surroundings, the old radar systems pinging steadily through the interference that would have blinded modern ships. Another wave of ionic disturbance approaching. James reported from his station, the ancient Geiger counter clicking frantically. This one's bigger than the last. Elena watched through the main viewport as the wave of energy washed over their hull, making the lights flicker briefly before stabilizing. Their backup systems hummed to life automatically. No AI needed, just good old-fashioned mechanical switches and failsafes. Dr. Martinez, status report. Elena called down to engineering. Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom, accompanied by the sound of metal striking metal. Outer shielding is holding at 82%. Not pretty, but we're managing. The ionic interference actually helps mask our engine signature, makes us harder to track. That could be useful, James muttered. He'd been trying to establish contact with any of the missing fleet vessels, but so far only static answered their hails. The bridge fell silent as they all processed the implications. 3 advanced fleet ships vanishing was concerning enough, but complete radio silence from an entire sector was something else entirely. Captain, Sarah's voice cut through the tension. I'm picking up something odd on the long-range scanners. You should see this yourself. Elena moved to the science station, studying the grainy display. Among the usual ionic patterns, there was something else. A perfect geometric shape, too regular to be natural. As they watched, it seemed to pulse with an energy signature unlike anything they'd encountered before. That's not fleet technology, Elena stated, her mind racing. And it's definitely not natural. Mr. Cooper, adjust course to keep us at maximum sensor range from that object. Dr. Martinez, I want everything our primitive little sensors can tell us about it. Before either officer could respond, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the geometric anomaly. Through the viewport, they watched as a fleet patrol vessel materialized from FTL travel directly in its path. The patrol ship's running lights flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. Full stop, Elena ordered immediately. Sarah, kill the engines. Switch to backup power only. Everyone to emergency stations. The Helios's engines died away, leaving them floating in the ion-filled void. On their sensors, they watched as the patrol vessel drifted lifelessly, its advanced systems completely silent. The geometric shape pulsed again, seeming to study its victim. It's some kind of electromagnetic pulse, Sarah whispered, her fingers flying over her keyboards, but like nothing we've ever seen. It's not just shutting down their systems, it's rewriting them somehow. The quantum processors, the neural interfaces, everything that makes modern ships modern is being turned against them. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she watched the patrol vessel begin to move again, but not under its own power. The geometric shape was pulling it in like a spider drawing in its prey. That's why we're still here, James realized aloud. Our systems are too primitive to be affected. We're so outdated we're actually immune. Sarah, Elena keyed the intercom. I need options. We can't help that ship if we can't move. Already ahead of you, Captain, the engineer replied, sounding almost excited. Remember that magnetic shield array we salvaged from the mining colony? The one everyone said was too crude to be useful. I think I can modify it to create a containment field around our engines. It won't be pretty, but it'll work. Do it, Elena ordered. James, prepare a message buoy. If we don't make it back, the fleet needs to know what they're dealing with. As her crew worked, Elena watched the geometric shape through the viewport. It was beautiful in its perfection and utterly alien in its purpose. The fleet had pushed for standardization, for everything to be interconnected and advanced, but they'd never considered what might happen when something came along that could turn that advancement into a weapon. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Helios, with its patchwork of outdated technology and mechanical systems, might be the only ship capable of standing against this threat. Not because it was powerful or advanced, but because it was simple enough to understand, repair, and control without relying on automation. Sometimes, Alina thought as she watched another fleet vessel fall dark in the distance, the best defense isn't having the most advanced technology. It's having technology you can trust not to think for itself. Ancient solutions. The Helios's cargo hold had been transformed into a makeshift laboratory, filled with equipment that would have made any fleet engineer cringe. Sarah had cannibalized spare parts from their inventory, creating a network of crude but effective scanning devices. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a display cobbled together from an old oscilloscope and radiation sensors. "There's a pattern to the alien entity's pulses. Every time it attacks, it sends out a query signal first, like it's asking ships to identify themselves." Elena studied the jagged lines on the oscilloscope. "And our modern friends are responding automatically, aren't they? Their AI systems can't help but answer." "Exactly," James chimed in from where he was modifying their communication array. "The quantum processors are designed to optimize every interaction. The moment they receive a query, they send back a complete system diagnostic. It's like handing over an instruction manual for how to shut you down. But we don't have that problem," Sarah added, her hands covered in grease from her latest modification. "Our systems can't respond because they're not smart enough to understand the query. Our stupidity is our shield." Elena watched through a viewport as another fleet vessel appeared at the edge of the sector. Before they could even attempt to warn it, the geometric entity pulsed, and the ship went dark. 6 ships lost now, their crews trapped in metal coffins powered by technology they couldn't control. "We need to get to those ships," Elena decided. "There might still be survivors, and we're the only ones who can help them." "I think I have a way," Sarah said, gesturing to her latest creation. She connected their old radar system to a salvaged mining laser, creating what looked like a jury-rigged weapon. The entity uses advanced frequencies to communicate with its victims. But what if we broadcast on the most basic frequency possible? Pure radio waves, like they used in the 20th century. Fight complexity with simplicity, Elena mused. "James, can you modify our communication array to broadcast on those frequencies?" "Already on it," he replied, holding up a device that looked more like an antique radio than modern communications equipment. "I had to dig through the ship's database to find old Earth schematics, but it should work." Over the next few hours, the crew of the Helios worked tirelessly, converting their cargo ship into something unprecedented, a vessel that could fight back against superior technology by embracing its own limitations. They installed manual override systems on every critical component, replaced digital controls with analog alternatives, and prepared for what might be humanity's most important mission. "The entity's moving again," James reported from his makeshift station. "It's heading toward the colony on New Haven. Their defensive systems are all automated. They wouldn't stand a chance," Elena finished. "How long until our modifications are ready?" Sarah emerged from a maintenance tunnel, her face streaked with oil. "The radio broadcaster is online, but we can only power it by rerouting energy from life support. We'll have about 30 minutes of air when we use it." Elena nodded. It was a desperate plan, but they were running out of options. The entity had already proven it could defeat any advanced technology humanity threw at it. Their only advantage was their simplicity, their understanding of basic principles that didn't require quantum computing or artificial intelligence. "Plot an intercept course," she ordered. "We'll position ourselves between the entity and New Haven. If our theory is correct, if it really can't comprehend systems that don't think for themselves, we might be able to confuse it long enough to save those ships." As the Helios chemical engines rumbled to life, Alina felt a strange sense of pride. Their outdated vessel, long dismissed as primitive by the fleet, was about to attempt something no modern ship could do: fight an enemy that turned advanced technology against itself. The geometric shape grew larger in their viewport, its perfect angles seeming to defy the chaos of space around it. Alina watched it pulse, searching for the quantum signatures it used to control its victims. But the Helios had no such signature to detect. They were a ghost in the machine, a remnant of an age when humans had to think for themselves. "Broadcasting in 3 minutes," Sarah announced. "After that, we're on emergency oxygen. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." Alina gripped her manual control stick, feeling the direct mechanical connection to their maneuvering thrusters. No computer assistance, no AI optimization, just human skill and understanding. Sometimes, she said to her crew, the best way to advance isn't to embrace the future. It's to remember what made us strong in the first place. Against the machine. The Helios shuddered as they approached the geometric entity, its perfect angles now filling their viewport. Behind it, the disabled fleet vessels hung in space like dark clouds, their quantum cores hijacked by an intelligence they were never designed to resist. "Beginning broadcast," Sarah announced, her fingers dancing across manual switches. The ship's lights dimmed as power diverted to their makeshift transmitter. 28 minutes of air remaining. The crude radio waves pulsed outward, carrying a signal so basic it predated the quantum age. Alina held her breath, watching the entity through their viewport. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the geometric shape flickered, its perfect symmetry disrupting for a fraction of a second. "It's working," James called out. "The entity's trying to process our signal, but it can't make sense of it. The frequency is too primitive for its advanced systems to interpret." Alina didn't waste the opportunity. "Full power to engines. Get us closer to those fleet ships. Sarah, prepare the emergency transponders." They'd modified dozens of simple radio beacons, each programmed to broadcast the same crude signal that had confused the entity. If they could attach them to the disabled vessels, they might be able to disrupt the entity's control long enough for the crews to regain control of their ships. The entity pulsed again, this time more erratically. On their simple displays, they could see it attempting to analyze their vessel, searching for the quantum signatures it used to dominate its victims. But the Helios was invisible to its advanced sensors, a ghost from an age it couldn't comprehend. 20 minutes of air, Sarah reported, her voice tight. "First fleet vessel in range." Alina guided the Helios alongside the nearest disabled ship, their manual docking system engaging with a clang that reverberated through the hull. James was already suited up, ready to make the space walk with the first transponder. "Remember," Alina warned him, "their systems are still active, just controlled by the entity. Be careful." James nodded, disappearing into the airlock. Through the viewport, they watched him maneuver across the fleet vessel's hull, looking tiny against its sleek surface. The transponder in his hands was almost comically crude, a simple radio antenna powered by chemical batteries. "Contact." James's voice crackled over the radio. "Transponder is..." "Wait, something's happening." The fleet vessel's running lights flickered as the transponder activated. For a moment, the ship seemed to shudder, caught between the entity's advanced control and the simple radio waves disrupting its systems. 15 minutes of air, Sarah announced, and the entities noticed what we're doing. Alina watched as the geometric shape began to move toward them, its perfect angles now seeming menacing rather than beautiful. But its movement was different, hesitant, almost uncertain, as if their primitive technology presented a puzzle it couldn't solve. "We're receiving a transmission from the fleet vessel," James reported excitedly. "Their crew, they're regaining control of their basic systems. The transponder is creating enough interference to give them a chance." Alina allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before focusing on their next challenge. "Plot a course to the next vessel. We need to move fast. That entity isn't going to stay confused forever." But as they disengaged from the first ship, alarms began blaring across their bridge. The entity had adapted, changing its approach. Instead of trying to control their systems, it was now generating an intense electromagnetic field. Hull temperature rising, Sarah warned. The entity's trying to cook us the old-fashioned way. It can't hack our systems, so it's going for brute force. 10 minutes of air, James added, and 3 more ships to go. Elena gripped her control stick tighter, feeling the vibrations through the mechanical linkage. They'd proven that humanity's understanding of basic principles could challenge even the most advanced technology. But now they faced a more fundamental problem: the simple physics of heat and metal. "Sarah," she called out, "remember what you said about our engine's instability being an advantage. I think it's time to embrace that instability." A grim smile spread across Sarah's face as she understood the captain's plan. "You want to create a feedback loop. Use our crude systems to generate so much electromagnetic chaos that the entity can't maintain a coherent field." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "Sometimes the best way to fight order is with chaos," Sarah finished, already moving to modify their engine controls. The Helios trembled as its systems were pushed beyond their design limits, their makeshift solutions about to be tested in ways their original engineers never imagined. They had 7 minutes of air left, 3 ships to save, and an alien entity learning to fight them on their own primitive terms. Elena watched the entity's perfect geometry ripple with energy and made her decision. All power to engines. Let's show this thing that humanity didn't survive all these centuries by relying on perfect technology. We survived by understanding how to use every tool at our disposal, even the crude ones. Signal in the noise. The Helios's engines screamed as Sarah pushed them beyond their safety limits. The electromagnetic chaos they generated filled their primitive sensors with static, but that was exactly what they wanted. If their own instruments could barely function, the entity's advanced systems would be equally confused. 5 minutes of air, James reported, his voice tight. Hull temperature at critical levels. Through the viewport, they watched as their gambit took effect. The entity's perfect geometric form began to fluctuate, its edges becoming unstable as it tried to maintain its electromagnetic attack through the chaos of the Helios's feedback loop. "Now," Elena ordered, "get those transponders to the other ships." James launched the remaining modified beacons, their simple radio signals adding to the electromagnetic mayhem. Each one targeted a different disabled fleet vessel, broadcasting their crude but effective disruption signal. The entity's response was immediate and violent. Its form stretched and twisted, trying to maintain control over its captured ships while dealing with the increasing chaos around it. The perfect angles that had made it seem so alien now warped and shifted, as if reality itself was rejecting its presence. 3 minutes of air, Sarah called out. "The engine containment won't hold much longer. We're pushing too much power through systems that were never designed for this." Elena watched as the nearest fleet vessel's lights flickered back to life, its crew regaining control as the entity's influence weakened. One by one, the other ships began to show signs of recovery, their basic systems returning to human control as the quantum networks that had made them vulnerable were overwhelmed by primitive radio waves. But their victory came at a cost. Warning lights flashed across the Helios bridge as their makeshift modifications began to fail. The hull groaned under the strain of their improvised attack, decades-old metal pushed to its absolute limit. 2 minutes of air, James announced. "Entity is, Captain, you need to see this." The geometric shape was changing, its perfect form dissolving into something else. As they watched, it seemed to fold in on itself, its advanced technology unable to maintain cohesion in the face of such fundamental chaos. It's not just confused, Sarah realized, studying her crude displays. It's being overwhelmed. Its systems are so advanced, so dependent on perfect order and quantum precision, that it can't handle this level of basic electromagnetic interference. We're not just disrupting its control, we're destroying its ability to maintain its own form. The entity pulsed one final time, a desperate attempt to reassert control over its environment. But the laws of physics that humans had first discovered centuries ago proved stronger than any advanced technology. In a flash of light that overloaded even their simple sensors, the geometric shape collapsed in on itself, leaving behind nothing but echoes on their radiation detectors. 30 seconds of air, James reported. Fleet ships are all showing normal power signatures. Their crews are back in control. Sarah, Elena called out, shut down the engines before they explode. James, get life support back online. She allowed herself a small smile. I think we've made enough chaos for one day. As their systems slowly returned to normal and fresh air began flowing through the ship, Elena received the first transmission from the rescued fleet vessels. The quantum networks were still offline, forcing them to communicate using the Helios old-fashioned radio. Helios, this is Captain Richards of the UES Hyperion. A voice crackled through their speakers. We saw everything. You saved us using technology we dismissed as obsolete. I don't know whether to be impressed or embarrassed. Be both, Elena replied. The entity proved that no matter how advanced we become, we can't forget the basic principles that got us here. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most sophisticated one. It's the one you understand well enough to use in ways its creators never imagined. The Helios's bridge was quiet as they began the journey back to fleet headquarters, their patchwork of salvaged parts and jury-rigged systems holding together through sheer stubbornness. They had faced an intelligence that could turn humanity's most advanced technology against itself, and they had won not through superior firepower or processing power, but through understanding. You know, Sarah said, looking at their smoke-stained engine displays, the fleet's going to want us to upgrade after this. They'll say it's for our own safety. Elena shook her head, feeling the mechanical vibrations of their chemical engines through her control stick. I don't think so. Today we proved something they'd forgotten. That technology is just a tool. It's not the sophistication of the tool that matters, but how well you understand how to use it. As if to emphasize her point, another warning light flickered on their ancient control panel. Sarah reached over and silenced it with a practiced tap of her wrench. Not pretty, James commented with a grin. But it works. Elena finished, guiding their battered ship home. It works.